In this video, the guys on Breaking Point discuss Trump's recent comments that he might slash the defense budget by 50%, that he's had conversations with both Russia and China about denuclearization. Again, this is Donald Trump, but let's watch this together, hear these guys give their opinions on it. I'll have some opinions as we go as well, and then I want to know your opinions in the comments section, but let's check it out.
This is definitely something very close to Ryan and I's heart. It was an off-the-cuff remark by Donald Trump where neither of us really believe it's true, but we would like for this to be true. Let's take a listen.
We have the greatest military equipment in the world. We're building it. At some point, when things settle down, I'm going to meet with China, and I'm going to meet with Russia in particular, those two, and I'm going to say there's no reason for us to be spending almost $1 trillion on military. There's no reason for you to be spending $400 billion. China's going to be at $400 billion. We're at $1 trillion. We're going to be at close to $1 trillion. And I'm going to say we can settle this on, we can spend this on other things. We don't have to spend this on military and I'm going to be meeting with China. You know, we were trying to de-escalate nuclear, and I was in a position where Russia had agreed and China had agreed we were going to start, and then we had a rigged election, so that never took place. But this one was too big to rig. We won by so much that it was too big to rig.
That President Putin really liked the idea of cutting way back on nuclear, and I think the rest of the world, we would have gotten them to follow, and China would have come along too. China also liked it. Tremendous amounts of money are being spent on nuclear, and the destructive capability is something that we don't even want to talk about today because you don't want to hear it. It's too depressing. So we want to see if we can denuclearize, and I think that's very possible. So,
Ryan, is this the most radical proposal since what? Since Richard Nixon or prior to that? I'm trying to think. Maybe the Kennedy administration, the START treaties, the nuclear treaties. This is definitely in that vein. Now, obviously, there's not a single. Is there maybe one lawmaker in Washington, maybe 2 or 3, who might have go along with this? But
like Bernie.
All 532 other members definitely going to be against this. So again,
Bernie, as long as you don't go after whatever they're making in Vermont.
That's right. As long as you're not touching whatever is made in Vermont, he says. Well, you know, we don't have to spend this on other things. We can lower our defense spending all around, and then we won't have to spend it on the military. It's a nice idea. It's certainly a nice idea.
You have to go back to JFK's American University peace speech.
Oh, the one that got him killed.
The one that probably got him killed.
Right.
And also people should go back and check out the conspiracy analysis around that where he may have been influenced by LSD toward the end of his life.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
Yeah, from Mary Pinchot Meyer, who he was having an affair with.
Meyer.
Who was
she? Secretary?
Cord Meyer's ex-wife.
Okay.
Cord Meyer, one of the kind of top original goons in the CIA. She was also very close friends with Timothy Leary.
Oh,
and she definitely dosed David Bradley and a bunch of other like luminaries in the 1960s. And
fascinating.
And so there's some
blowing my mind right now.
No question she smoked weed with JFK.
All right. Well, it's the old weed.
There is some question.
We'll make an exception.
Did they trip?
Okay.
It's possible.
Yeah.
She was then murdered on the towpath. So go have fun down there.
I'm unfamiliar.
Have fun down that rabbit hole, he says.
With all of this.
Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah,
this is a good one.
I need to talk to Oliver about it. We got to give him a call.
So Trump is creeping into dangerous territory here.
You're right. This is very
but
dangerous territory.
He's obviously correct. If you can sit down with China and Russia and be like, look, we're dropping $1 trillion, you're dropping $400 billion. Russia, you're dropping an insane percentage of your GDP on military spending and nuclear spending. You can't afford that. We're getting bankrupted. China, don't you want to do more Belt and Road stuff instead of nuclear weapons? And if they can come to an actual agreement on that, that's Nobel Peace Prize worthy.
That's again why I'm so supportive of ditching all of these fake institutions, which I think either propagate conflict or do everything to truss up, great power competition in the language of international values. We were talking a lot about this last time with Crystal about the idea of propping up and sending 1 million or so Ukrainians to their death or to being maimed for democracy. And it's like, this is obviously not about democracy. It's about realpolitik. a bad reading, in my opinion, about trying to get all these Russians killed. But it especially falls apart with realpolitik policy in Israel. So you're like, oh, well, actually, we're okay with it over here, but we're definitely not okay with it over here. It's ridiculous, right? And it falls apart on its own face to any neutral observer out there. Her point was, well, maybe it was a good thing to at least still trust it up with democracy. But this gets to my point that there is no true balance of power in the language of human rights, democracy, institutions. Great powers are the people who run the world. It has just been through these institutions that have been their vehicle. At its heart, the future of the world will be, basically decided by the nuclear powers, and especially by the United States and China, to a lesser extent Russia here, with respect to Europeans. So just sit down with them and be like, okay, what are we doing here? This is something that we did so much in the past. I mean, one of the things I respect so much about our leaders like Eisenhower and Truman and FDR is, outside of FDR's case, Truman and Eisenhower were deeply skeptical of Khrushchev or of Stalin. They still met with them all the time because they even, mutually distrusted each other at those alliance tables. But they had obviously a common enemy under Nazi Germany. But even beyond that, trying to figure out what can we do about, making sure that there is not such another devastating war. And I think, if anything, the removal of consequence, like of war, what you were talking about earlier with Europe, has turned all of this into like an intellectual exercise that belies how important it is to actually have true balance of power, to have honesty in international relations, where hypocrisy, in my opinion, just breeds too many gaps for people like Russia and others to view what is U.S. national policy with respect to Ukraine. When we don't speak in the language of national interest, we both cannot understand one another, but it leads to so much ambiguity, hypocrisy, and others, that it leads to things like Iraq, Libya, the North Koreans being unable to trust us for giving up their imagine if we had never taken down the Libyan regime and destroyed Gaddafi. I think there's not a big chance, but there's somewhat of a chance that the North Koreans would listen. But that's what they always say. They're like, I'm not listening to you. I will never trust you. Look at Gaddafi. I don't blame them. If I were them, there's no way I would give it up either.
Right. He gave up nuclear weapons, and and then quickly thereafter he's dead. The only place where I'd slightly disagree with you there is that I would draw some daylight between the approaches of FDR and Truman. Whereas FDR, I think, if he had lived, was willing to, and in the whole, if he had lived, you can kind of fill in your own utopia, but there's a lot of evidence, I think, that FDR had decided that in a post-World War II era, it was time to share the world with communism and with the Soviet Union.
That's definitely true.
It was not going to be it wasn't going to be a Cold War that was a zero-sum contest of we must defeat them or they will defeat us. That he believed that there was enough of a world order that could be that the pressure of communism was going to blunt the ills of capitalism and create enough of a social welfare state that it would be more stable in a Keynesian kind of way. Whereas Truman and the kind of the national security apparatus that was behind him really saw it as a zero sum. So in some ways, we now have another opportunity to make that bargain with another version of communism, but now it's instead of FDR, it's Trump, and instead of Stalin, it's Xi.
I mean, that's my problem right there with all of this. Is they said in the beginning, neither of us think this is really going to happen. Instead of FDR, it's Trump. I mean, full stop. Instead of FDR, it's Trump. That says it all.
And let's share the world.
Yeah. Well, she is a lot smarter than Stalin, so I'd rather talk to him.
Let's share it instead of fighting over it. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum competition.
Right. Well, I'm not so sure about that, but at the very least, zero-sum competition can actually still have a more stable outcome than whatever the hell is currently happening with Ukraine. It's not in NATO, but we're going to treat it like NATO, and we're going to send a lot of troops there, and it's a vital interest in NATO. Except NATO countries are supposed to be a vital interest. It doesn't make any sense. All of it falls apart in itself. You got to defend Ukraine so that we can defend NATO. It's like, well, the whole purpose is to defend NATO. So, and then before that, NATO knocked off Muammar Gaddafi. So what? Libya was a vital interest to NATO? That still remains one of the most insane things that ever happened. Let us, however, say that the resistance right now to reducing military spending is titanic in terms of what you're up against in Washington. We have an example here from Dan Crenshaw, some people have called him. I don't know why they would. Here on Face the Nation. Let's take a listen.
When it comes to the military and military spending, the U.S. spends about 3.4% of its GDP on defense. Are you on board with boosting it to 5%, which is what President Trump is saying Western countries need to do? Are Republicans going to do that?
It's quite the target. Look, we've got a lot of work to do right now. We've got a budget passed from the last year's budget. Government funding expires on March 14th, so we got to deal with that. We got to deal with the debt ceiling. We've got to finance disaster aid for California wildfires. We've got a reconciliation bill coming up. Look, you look at the world at the moment and where America stands and the investments we need to make. It's pretty obvious we need to increase defense spending, and the exact amount, of course, will get worked out in Congress.
So there you go.
And yes, and Pentagon spending is the only thing that the media will ever talk about in its proper terms, which to me, the proper way of talking about spending is as a percentage of GDP.
Obviously. Because
that's how you can understand something. You know, what do you spend in rent as a percentage of what you make? Like, that's what matters.
That's right.
And so 3.4%, all of a sudden now it's oh, that's kind of tiny. We could do a little bit more than that. They never will talk about like the actual foreign aid to like Africa as a percentage of GDP. That isn't the like regime change.
Well,
stuff.
you're going to hear it from me at least, right? I'll tell. Well, that's part of why I get annoyed. Everyone's like, "This is an American revolution." I'm like, guys, it's 0.7% of the federal budget. Okay, like, and actually,
and that includes all the
whatever this Africa stuff. I was going to say. So if you take out the woke bullshit, it's like maybe 0.25% of the federal budget. If you want a real American revolution, you got to go for the Pentagon or you got to go for the entitlement programs. I don't think we should go for the entitlement programs. So what do we have?
Pentagon it is.
Let's talk. Right? Yeah. If anybody ever wants to talk about that, my door is open. My phone line is ready. However, conveniently, there's just way too much. I mean, as you and I know right now, of all the talk for firing federal workers, etc., there has not been even a modest dent in what the economy of Washington really is. If Doge, all those other people actually go after the Pentagon, that's when you're going to see a real fall in housing values and a destruction of the Northern Virginia economy. Until that time, we're not talking about a substantial amount of people.
The closest we got was we reported last week that Elon Musk had a $400 million contract for these armored Teslas.
We had it here on the show. Yeah.
And then, whoop, they nixed that contract.
So did they nix it? I thought they only changed the name of it.
First, they changed the name, and then a day or two later, they said, actually, this whole thing's on hold.
Really?
And frankly, from a green, let's talk about clean energy real quick. From a green perspective, this was stupid anyway, because if you are driving around in an armored diplomatic vehicle, then by definition, you're in a difficult country, it's a developing country.
Right. Yeah, so where are you going to charge your car?
You're going to charge it at the embassy, which is fired by a coal-powered plant. Like any country, if you're in Norway, you don't need an armored Tesla.
Yeah, good point.
You can get around in an Uber.
Right.
And there you can maybe find some renewable energy. But in Congo, where you do need armored vehicles to get around, those are coal plants that are firing your electric vehicle. So you've got the carbon footprint of making the thing. Then you've got the carbon and of getting the rare earths.
It's starting to sound like me on electric vehicles.
Then you got the carbon footprint of shipping it over to Congo.
That's right.
And then you're plugging it into a coal-fired power plant.
Well, it's extra stupid because you take the cobalt out of the Congo, you ship it to China or the United States, you refine it, you put it in the country, and you ship it back to the Congo.
And then you plug it into a coal-fired power plant.
Plug it into a coal-fired power plant. Yeah,
so they've paused that contract.
Okay, good. Yeah,
you're welcome. That's $400 million for you.
Right, but now what are they going to buy? They should just buy a Land Cruiser. That's what we all know. Look,
buy the old.
What's that truck that all the terrorists use? Hilux.
Toyota. Get the Toyota.
That thing is sick. Let's be honest. We have got a lot of proof in a lot of these videos.
I want to see the diplomats riding in the back of the white Toyota.
In the back of a Toyota Hilux. It's indestructible.
Well, it's nice to dream. I certainly can understand with the rise of AI and the associated expense. I mean, Xi and Putin are not insane men, whatever else you want to say about them. And nobody wins a nuclear conflict. So if they really are saying to Trump, well, why don't we just agree to get rid of this existential human threat? That would be wonderful. That'd be incredible. But I guess I'll believe it when I see it. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments?